Hello everyone, my name is Todd Lawrence. I am the Idaho State E-Rate Coordinator. This is a series that I'm doing, basically an audio series on the E-Rate training that I did throughout the state of Idaho in the different regions. And what I did here is took the presentation and broke it up into basically 4 different sections to allow you, the listener, a little easier time to digest information and spend the time needed, dedicated to listening, versus sitting down for the entire 3+ hours at one time. So this hopefully is a little bit easier of a concept. So this first presentation is over the beginner section on the fall of 2016 training that I did. So let's dive right into it. So here's kind of an overview of the agenda that we're going to talk about, just kind of an E-Rate overview of the program, the background, where it came from, talking about the budget, who's eligible to receive these reimbursements, what kind of services are eligible, talk about the FCC forms that are important in the process to be successful, and some of the do's and don'ts of the program, of how to be successful in this program. This is a list of the acronyms that I'm using in the presentation, just kind of a cheat sheet, if you will. It is easier to, sometimes, I'm not a big fan of the acronyms, but it is easier to kind of fit information in on a slide using an acronym. But I do spell out the acronym fully on that page for the first time, and then as we progress through the slides, the acronyms do get used more frequently. So just kind of an overview of the acronyms that are most commonly used in this presentation. So in the beginning, so the FCC, or the Federal Communications Commission, they are the federal agency that oversees the E-Rate program. One of 4 programs, basically. USAC, Universal Services Administration Company, they are a nonprofit company that is hired by the FCC to manage the E-Rate program. The E-Rate program falls within the Schools and Libraries division of the programs. There are basically 4 different programs that the FCC and USAC work and manage, and the Schools and Library is where the E-Rate program resides in with USAC. In 1998, when this program started, there was roughly about $2.3 billion available for reimbursements, and those reimbursements were to be given to schools based on poverty level, a reimbursement percentage for internet services, voice services, and then some internal connection services as well. In 2015, or funding year 2015, they did change the structure of the program a little bit, and they increased the budget from $2.3 to $3.9 billion. They also added an additional $1 billion just for internal connections, otherwise known as Category 2. So in the past, previously they were considered Priority 1, Priority 2, because they had one budget that it worked under. As soon as all the applications were consumed as far as the reimbursements go, any money left over would shift to any applications that filed under Priority 2. And in typical case, the highest percentage schools, NSLP percentage schools in the country, would get this, because there wasn't much money left over after the budget from Priority 1 was used up. So there wasn't much money, and the applicants did not have to, there was no limit on what they can request. So that money went quickly. Now they changed it from Category 1 to Category 2. Same they mean the same essentially. Category 1 is your internet service, your voice services. Category 2 is your internal connections, your Wi-Fi, your cabling, your components, server racks, backup, UPS battery backups, etc. All those eligible services under Category 2. However, they have independent budgets. So the Category 1 budget does not affect what is left over for Category 2. They are independent, which is a matter of if you're applying for Category 2, it's not a matter of if you'll get funded, it's a matter of when you'll get funded. So the purpose was to get that money dispersed across the country so schools can receive that internal connection expenses, help cover some of those. So that's kind of the background there. The money, where does it come from? So this is just an example of my personal cell phone bill, just a page here, and on the bottom left-hand corner you'll see that there's a line item called Federal Universal Service Charge, and it's a small tax, 42 cents in this case. And this is a tax that gets charged on all cell phone bills, all landline bills, commercial, residential, etc. So as you can see, small pennies, few pennies each month, times hundreds of millions of bills, money can add up pretty quickly. So that is where the fund comes from. And then those dollars get put into all 4 programs under the FCC, and schools and libraries is one of those beneficiaries programs that gets the tax money for this program. So as I said earlier, Category 1, Category 2, these are the 2 types of services that the E-rate focuses on. Category 1 is your voice services, which is part of a phase down, 20 percentage points every year, and we'll get into more detail on that. Also, your data transmission or your internet, and your WAN, your wide area network. If you have that, that is eligible under Category 1 as well. Category 2, internal connections, managed internal broadband services. If you have somebody coming in, a provider coming in and managing your Wi-Fi network, that is eligible. And then any maintenance, you have somebody coming in, a third party coming in and doing work on your network to keep it up and running. That is, for the most part, those are the main core Category 2 services. So Category 2 budgets. So starting in funding year 2015, USAC calculates a Category 2 budgets for each school or library. The library or school can receive discounts on the pre-discount cost of Category 2 services up to their Category 2 budget. And I'll get into how you calculate your Category 2 budget. And then the Category 2 budget that you receive is for a 5-year period from the date you receive it, for 5 years from that date. So you have to factor in what it is that you need and understand that that is for 5 years from that point along there. So, and there are some things you can do, adjustments you can make throughout the year, and I'll get into more detail on that as well. So as I said, budget calculation, this is how you factor your budget calculations. Now there's a different factor for schools and there's a different factor for libraries. So here, listed here is the school calculation at the top. It's $150 times the maximum number of full and part-time students in that school. That is, you take that, and that is your pre-discounted budget. So you can have a vision or understanding from a budget standpoint how much you have available to spend to plan your technology infrastructure in your buildings. Now, the one caveat here I'll add here is there is a allowance or an acceptance that if different, let's say, for example, you have a middle school building that is shared by some high school students, that it may be adjacent to that middle school. Now, those high school students that come over to that middle school to use that building can be counted as part of the student population for the middle school. That is the design of that. The purpose behind that is they want to make sure that there's enough Wi-Fi equipment, density, etc., to allow the quality of service to be up to par for that maximum number of students. So that's the purpose behind that. So if you have, an extra 30 students coming over from the high school in that middle school, count those 30 students in both your high school as your normal population, and also include them in your calculation for your middle school, because that head count needs to be covered, so that equipment needs to be covered for that maximum head count at any given time. Then library calculation, they just basically take the calculation by square foot of the building. So $2.30 is times the square footage of a building. For urban libraries, it's going to be $5 per square foot in those libraries in the urban areas. And then if you have a small school or small library to where your student population doesn't calculate, you have a very low student population or a very small building, your minimum that you can receive is $9,200 for both the schools and libraries. If your calculations fall below that, you at least get the $9,200 to plan for internal connections. Eligibility. Who is eligible to receive these services? Basically, any elementary and secondary schools and school districts throughout the state are eligible. Charter, private, etc. Basically, any of those. Non-traditional facilities, conditional by state, it varies across the country. Libraries and library systems are eligible. Then consortia groups. Consortia is just a group of schools or a group of libraries that have come together to establish a consortia to receive internet connection and or internal connections together, just to kind of leverage buying power of a larger scale. Discounts. So E-rate, as I said before, calculates or provides discounts for these services based upon poverty, and they use the USDA National School Lunch Program as the tool to determine poverty level for an entity, a school or a library. You can receive discounts on an E-rate side from anywhere from 20 to 90% on Category 1 services, or 20 to 85% on Category 2 services. Those discounts are factored in by using your school lunch program in that school district. If you don't have a school lunch program, there are ways to determine an equivalent to a national school lunch program. So that is, you don't have to have a school lunch program in order to participate in E-rate. So there are other ways to do that. And then libraries will use that district population or district number as their NSLP equivalent percentage. And then the consortium, they basically take an average of all the members in the consortium to determine what the discount is. So there has been some confusion on folks, applicants, saying, well, my discount is only at 50%. It's not really, I don't really have that high of a bill, but it's not really that big of a discount. That's not true, because what that does is there's a kind of a multiplier that's in place here. So as you can see on this chart, if I was a 50% school district, NSLP school district, I would get an 80% equivalent E-rate discount accordingly on both Category 1 and Category 2 in that example. So as you can see, you use on the far left column, you want to take your NSLP equivalent discount, put it in there, and then you slide over and factor and see what the equivalent E-rate discount is for those Category 1 and Category 2 services, and then also based on urban or rural status as well. So the discounts historically have been very challenging to figure out, and then how to apply it to an E-rate standpoint. And like I said, in 2015, they made some big changes to the program of how they do this, and then one of the things they did simplify is how they factor in that discount for the entities. So starting with school districts. So all the school districts gets the same discount. A specific school in a district doesn't get a separate discount compared to another school in that same district. They take the entire district population, multiply it by this NSLP discount, or divide it by, and then that factors in your E-rate discount based upon the entire population of that particular school. And then that urban and rural status is determined on where that school district resides. Schools and charter schools. Now, they may, in most cases, they do reside within a school district, but if they are their own school or charter school, and they do not have they have a separate school board, not affiliated with that school district that they reside in as far as just geographically, they do factor their own discount based upon their own student population and not the school district, because they're not part of that school district. They're their own school or school district. And that urban and rural is calculated by that address as well. Libraries use the school district that library resides in, or the outlet resides in. So they calculate their urban and rural status based upon their outlets, and the discount may or may not match the district because of where they reside. But the student population or student discount rate is using where the main outlet is located as their percentage. Community Eligibility Program, or CEP, there has been some confusion on calculation, because it is a little bit more complex compared to just using the National School Lunch Program, or NSLP discount. This is another federal program that's under the USDA that the E-rate program is using to determine this. So the purpose of this slide is for two things: to make this aware to school districts that we're not aware of this program. If you do have a high student population is in the National School Lunch Program, free and reduced. So, however, this is based on calculations of direct certified students, which is a different calculation and achieved differently than the National School Lunch or Free and Reduced program. So if you have a minimum of 40% of your students are direct certified, you could qualify, that entity could qualify or would qualify to be part of the CEP program. So the CEP program, if you do qualify and you are approved for that level, you basically, there's an extra step in the process, because you have to find what is the school district's NSLP equivalent percentage, because you need to be able to put that percentage in that table to find out what your corresponding E-rate percentage. So this calculation is simple. However, it basically take the number of students that are direct certified, multiply them by 1.6, that gets you the equivalent NSLP percentage. You take that number, put it in the table, find out what the corresponding E-rate percentage is. So, as an example, in this example, we have a single charter school that has 1,000 students. 500 of them are direct certified. So that would be 500 times 1.6 equals 800 eligible for NSLP. 800 divided by 1,000 is 80%. So that is 80% is your NSLP equivalent percentage. Now you can take that percentage and put it in that table, and what is your factor. So in this example, you're an 80% eligible school would be a 90% E-rate eligible school or entity for that example. There are some challenges regarding direct certification numbers. They typically, the state will provide a base number, but the district typically knows those students better than the state does. For example, if we provide you, the district, a baseline, says we think you have this many students that are direct certified, and you see on the list that Sally is on the list, but Sally has 3 siblings, and those 3 siblings are not on the list. Well, by rule, those 3 siblings can be added to the NSO, added to the direct certified count. So already there, that count is inaccurate based upon what the state has. So typically the district will have a more accurate number of direct certified. So it becomes challenging from my perspective to report this information back up to USAC to use as a validation process. So working on making some changes there to help all of us become more accurate information. So timelines. So here's kind of a quick overview of the timelines. So there has been some confusion regarding the timelines for E-rate or the acronym used in E-rate. The FY can be used as fiscal year or funding year. So in my communication, I'm constantly always using the word funding year. So if you look at the bottom 2 bullets, I'll just kind of skip down to those because it gives you kind of a quick example. So fiscal year, because we all in the school districts, we all talk about fiscal because of budgets. It's how we manage money, talk about the budget cycles, legislation, etc. Fiscal year 2016 is July 1st of 2015 through June 30th of 2016. Funding year, which is E-rate terminology, funding year 2016 is July 1st, 2016 through June 30th, 2017. So, as you can see, it creates a little bit of confusion regarding which year we're actually talking to if you're not really being specific on if it's a fiscal year or funding year. So I try to make that clarification in my communications with people so we're on the same page. So at any given time, in an E-rate cycle, at any given day, at any given time of the year, we are working basically with 3 funding years. For example, funding year 2015. That is finishing up. In most cases, it's probably done in most cases, but sometimes there's some lingering funding commitments or there's some invoicing on the bearer forms, and there's some extensions on the bearer forms you need to fill out. So that might still be an open opportunity to kind of finish those up. We're currently in funding year 2016, so those services, those invoices you're currently managing, and then now we're looking at the open windows to plan for funding year 2017. So as the slide says, basically E-rate is an exercise in project management because you have to look at basically a scope of 3 different funding years at any given time. Quick overview of the process because I like visual understanding, so this kind of helps me when I was first learning this process. So as the process begins, you look at the eligible service list, the ESL, the eligible services. What's eligible to receive discounts, reimbursements on? And how does that fit into our technology plan, the things that we want to do going forward? You figure that out. You fill out a Form 470, which basically starts the process. You're just basically announcing what services you're going after. And then you have providers will bid on those services that's listed on the Form 470. So you go through a competitive bidding process, and we'll get into some detail there about who was selected, how it was selected, etc. You keep documentation, recording all that, and then you basically fill out the 471. The Form 471 tells USAC, this is the service we're going with, this is the provider we're going with. This is our this is the entity information, student population, all the different school buildings that may be associated with the school library, the libraries that are associated, etc., the landscape of everything, the costs of the services on the monthly basis, what is the recurring cost, what is the one-time cost, etc., etc. All that is provided on the 471. That 471 goes into a process called PIA. It's basically a mini audit team that goes through and makes sure that the 471 process was managed and handled according to the E-rate guidelines correctly. Once that is done, it's correctly done. You received a funding commitment decision letter, an FCDL. That is basically your golden ticket to the process of what services you've selected, the costs you selected it, and how you did that Form 471. Once services have started, typically July 1st of that new funding year, you fill out a Form 486. All this is a very simple form. You're just telling USAC that the services have begun and you are SIPA compliant. SIPA compliant, Children's Internet Protection Act, is a mandatory component to receive E-rate reimbursements on. You have to be SIPA compliant with your internet. Then after your services you're being invoiced for those services, you either fill out a Form 472 or 474. If you are paying for your services in full, you fill out a 472. If your provider's paying for the services, only billing you that portion, it's a 474. And we'll get into some more detail in here in just a moment. And then you want to keep all your information records and everything for a potential audit in the future to make sure everything is up to par. And then documentation retention policy is up to 10 years. That 10 years is after services have ended, so it's basically a very long time. So take that in consideration. So let's begin with the forms. The 470. This is, like I said before, this begins the E-rate process. This allows you to go out to announce what services you're going to go after. Now, in most cases, your 470, you will need to have a corresponding RFP to go with that, and you upload that RFP inside the Form 470, which posts both of them. Now, the 470 has to be posted for a minimum of 28 days before you can file your 471. So that becomes very important because the 470 window is very long. It's very open. It's basically, technically, it's never closed. However, the 471 window is a defined date range, and that defined date range needs to be a big factor of how you are planning your 470 competitive bidding process, evaluation, etc. That all has to be done within the compliance of the E-rate rules and also state law as well. Now, an RFP is not a required document. You have to kind of lean back on the state law for that, depending on what Idaho is doing from a state law and what the contract amount is, will determine whether you need an RFP document to go with the 470. Now, in my opinion only, I believe that an RFP should always accompany a 470 because I believe it protects a layer of protection for the school district or the library system. You can put in terms and conditions, things that are required for you, expectations of different things. It offers a layer of protection. It also provides a platform of how you're going to score those providers. You put in a scoring rubric within there so the providers know how you're going to be graded, how they're going to be graded, scored on. So I think a simple bid or a simple project, lower cost, should be accompanied with a simple RFP. And then quite the opposite. If it's a complex, then in most cases a complex RFP is mandatory in those higher dollar amounts. That is my opinion. So And this talks a little bit more about that. So if you issue an RFP and a 470, those both have to be posted for a minimum of 28 days. The benefit also on the provider side is that is where the detail of your service that you're requesting can be listed, identified, mapped out, described, etc. On the 470, there's a very, very, very small narrative box that doesn't give you a lot of space to put in what it is you're looking for. You're looking for internet service. This is the speeds. This is the amount of bids we want increments of 100 meg, for example. All those details can be put in an RFP rather than the 470 narrative box because it's very small. So that is another benefit there. 471. This again is where the big part of this is probably the biggest and most time-consuming form of all of them. This is where all the details of your entity, student populations, the contract of the service, the costs, one-time costs, upfront costs, and monthly recurring costs, start dates, etc., etc. All those details are within that. So once you go through the 470, you go through the bidding process, you go through the awarding process, scoring, etc. You've awarded this business to this particular provider. Then you can fill out the 471 within the window. And like I said, the 471 will have a finite date range that you can file the 471. Can't do it before, and you certainly can't do it after, because if you miss the deadline, there's not a whole lot that can be done about that. So the typical window date range is on the 471 is typically about 70 to 75 days. The suggested date range for this upcoming funding year 17 window for the 471 is likely to be shorter. It's likely to be about 60 days. Nothing's been posted, nothing's been official yet, and I will make that announcement once I know the official date. But it's looking to be about 60 days. So the 471, if you file a 471 and you need to make some changes to that 471 because you notice that there's some errors that or a building isn't listed or something was missed or was left out, you can file a receipt acknowledgement letter or a RAL modification. Very easy to do, not hard to do. That helps the process make sure that those errors are corrected very early in the process. So and I can certainly help you with some of that. The information is going to be that comes through to you will come through your Epic account, your EPC account, and that will come through the news feeds section in your Epic account. So at the very top, you'll see there's on the menu bar on the far left of that is news feed. You click on that, and it shows you all of your information that you receive from USAC on these. Funding commitment decision letter, like I said, this is kind of your Willy Wonka gold ticket. This is what tells you that your process was good. Everything about the process, the selection process, the scoring process, the bidding time, et cetera, all of that was done correctly, and then you get a funding commitment decision letter. This allows you to go forward in the process and start receiving services and then eventually receive reimbursements on those services as well. And again, your funding commitment decision letter will show up to you in your news feed in Epic in your account. 486, as I said earlier, this is basically telling USAC that the services have started. Typically this is done after July 1st, and your services are SIPA compliant in terms of the internet services. So you have a filter that is SIPA compliance on your internet. Now there is a deadline on the 486 that it's basically 120 days after you receive your funding commitment decision letter. So you want to get that done fairly quickly after July 1st typically. FCC Form 498. This is not a new form, but is a new form for applicants. Service providers have used this form in the past. All this is USAC is moving from mailing a check to direct deposit, and they need to know what information is needed for that direct deposit: bank number, routing number, account number, tax ID number, etc., etc. Your business manager or the financial person should be the one filling this form out in Epic. If they're not the person that is the administrator in Epic, they need to be created as a user in the account, in the Epic account, and then they have to be assigned the business or financial role so they can see the Form 498 in order to fill out the form. And it is a one and done. It's a one-time form you have to fill out for the direct deposit, unless your banking information changes. So if your banking information doesn't change, you fill it out once and you leave it alone until that day comes you do change the bank that you currently use. FCC Form 472 and the 474. So this is also known as, the 472 is known as the Bear form. The 474 is known as the SPY form. Bear, if you are paying your services, your invoices in full, and you want to you're receiving the reimbursements directly from USAC, you will fill out your Bear form. Now, the Bear form needs to be completed 120 days after services have ended in that funding year. For example, funding year usually ends June 30th. 120 days from that point is roughly October 28th of that same calendar year. So, for example, June 30th, 2016 was the end of funding year 15, and then October 28th of 2016 was the deadline to fill out your Bear form. Now, this was the last year you had to use the old legacy Bear form. You needed a PIN number in order to do that, and that's the last time that would be done. The Bear form would be moved into the Epic portal for completion in year for funding year 16 and beyond. FCC Form 474. This is the service provider form. If your service provider, you've agreed to this, and your service provider will only bill you or invoice you your percentage discount on that service, they will pay the full price, bill you only your discounted portion. They will get the reimbursement back from USAC, so they will fill out the 474. You don't have to do that. They will do that. It makes it easier. However, not all service providers will do this because there is a risk involved in doing that. So that will have to be established on the 471 when you submit it. What type of invoicing are you going to go after? Because that's an agreement between you and the service provider. So things you must do to be successful: file all your forms before the deadlines, follow all Idaho state procurement laws, you follow the E-rate rules and guidelines, of course, and I can help anybody through that to kind of interpretations of different things. Respond to PIA. I'm typically copied on all correspondence that come through. I'm here to help answer those questions, provide validations of your student count, etc. Keep up with all the details within the process of every funding year, and then if you're able to attend to the training sessions that I provide. I know that it's not always feasible or possible depending on schedules and locations, etc. So this is why I'm doing these audio versions, so those who are not able to attend can listen and use it this way. And then if you have friends to reach out to or neighboring districts or myself, reach out, ask questions, and have patience first and foremost. This is a trying process. Things you can't do. So you can't pay for services to any residential home, or even if it's a superintendent's. That's not eligible. You cannot include eligible services as part of your request, you have to have those ineligible services cost allocated out. Most service providers understand this process pretty well, and they're pretty savvy with it, but it is up to you as the applicant to realize and understand those services, which are eligible, which are not, and make sure they are cost allocated out if there are any ineligible services as part of your contract. You cannot receive help from any vendor with any of your forms, your RFP, your competitive bidding process and scoring, etc. They cannot be involved. Communication needs to be very, 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 almost no communication, but there are times where clarifications need to be made with the provider. I would have suggestions of, even if you respond to one provider, you respond to several of them, or you try to keep it very fact-oriented and try not to give one provider more information than another. You want to protect yourself in this process. You cannot accept any free services from the vendor. Truly, nothing is free. You cannot accept any gifts from a vendor that exceed $20 per event or even $50 per year. You cannot transfer equipment within a 3-year period that you receive it. That is typically under the Category 2 services. So if you have switches or controllers or access points, etc., those have to remain in that location for a minimum of 3 years, unless there's a big reason, fire, flood, something of the reason you had to move that equipment, and that would be documented, of course. Then after the 3 years, you can then do with it what you would like. You can't receive discounts for duplicative or redundant services. There was a lot of denials on services for LTE hotspots. Those LTE hotspots are considered duplicative services for a school, unless, for example, you have a portable that's set up, and the only way to get internet to that portable is using a hotspot for that period of time. So internet can be out to that building. So those are justifiable reasons, and you'll need to make those justifications in your forms as well. And then you can't receive discounts for backup or spares, so extra parts. So even though if it's an eligible service, like for example, you're buying 10 UPS backups, but you're going to buy 15 because 5 extra, you never know. That 5, you can't. You have to have a reason or a purpose behind the number that you buy and use. All right, so this is my contact information. If you don't already have it, I am here for you, answer questions, help you through this process. This is what I want to do. This is what I enjoy to do. I learn every day with this process and program. So I'm here to help in any way I can. My name, email address, office phone number. This is also my blog that I use. If you don't currently follow my blog, I would suggest following it. There's a little window that you can type in follow by email. You type in your email address, and then once I make any changes to that blog, E-rate specific only, you get a notification via email, so you don't have to remember to go out and look for information. The system sends you an email, says I made an update or I posted something, then you can go out and look at it. So I'm using that as that purpose. So with that concludes the session of the overall or overview or beginners section of the E-rate training. So any questions, feel free to give me a call. Thank you very much, and have a great day.